the most ruthless mafia boss in Chicago, just put a gun to a chubby accountant's head. But she didn't beg for her life. Instead, this frumpy, mocked clerk rolled her eyes and revealed she already stole $40 million from his cartel. While everyone thought Penelope was just a pathetic, oversized pushover, she had secretly rigged his entire criminal empire to an automated dead man switch. If her heart rate drops, the FBI gets everything. And now this terrifying underworld king is completely at her mercy. Listen up, this story is absolute madness. People always whispered about Penelope Cartwright. Society looked at this quiet girl and decided she was a pushover, destined to fade away in some boring beige cubicle. Nobody gave her stained cardigans or nervous stutter a second thought. Here is your first lifer lesson: never judge a book by its cover. Loreno Bian, the ruthless boss of Chicago's deadliest syndicate, learned that the hard way. He walked into her office expecting an easy target. Instead, he walked straight into the jaws of an apex predator hiding in plain sight, holding a digital nuke to his entire empire. Though she was not his victim, she was his downfall. It all kicked off at Pendleton Financial, sitting high up on the 42nd floor in Chicago. To the average person walking by, this place looked like a super fancy wealth management firm for the city elite. But to the real players in the shadows, it was the slickest money laundering operation in the entire Midwest. Stuck at a cramped desk in the dark corner of the archives room was 26-year-old Penelope. She was basically the office ghost, hiding out in these massive drab wool sweaters. She kept her eyes glued to the floor whenever anyone talked to her. Her toxic co-worker was literally called her pudding penny behind her back. Her boss, Arthur Pendleton, treated her like a slightly useful chair. Life lesson number 2, how you treat about middle in your life says everything about your character, and these guys were failing hard. Arthur had this terrible habit of dumping massive, totally wrecked ledgers on her desk at 4:50 p.m. on a Friday. He fully expected them magically fixed by Monday morning. And guess what? Penelope always delivered. She never complained, never asked for a raise, just pushed up her thick glasses and vanished into the math. Literally everyone in that office thought she was just desperate for any tiny crumb of attention or validation because she was awkward. But bro, they were so spectacularly wrong it hurts. Here is a little wisdom for you. People who stay quiet are usually the ones actually paying attention. Penelope could not care less about Arthur or his validation. She only cared about the puzzle, because numbers were her true native language. For the last 3 years, this quiet girl Berzine secretly translated the darkest, most insane secrets of the entire Chicago underworld. She knew exactly whose dirty money she was scrubbing. She had the names of every shell company, the offshore routing digits, and even the exact bribes handed to Judge Harvey Wallace and the deputy mayor. More importantly, she saw everything her clueless boss was missing. But the fake peace at Pendleton Financial absolutely shattered on a rainy Tuesday. The heavy oak doors blasted open, and the room temperature just dropped to 0. Lorenzo Biagay had entered the chat. The guy was a terrifying force of nature, rocking a custom charcoal suit that perfectly hid his shoulder holster. He meant absolute business. Lorenzo moved like a total predator, a guy fully aware he held the power of life and death. Cold, dark eyes, sharp jaw, and a massive reputation. His syndicate controlled the docks, the unions, and massive underground gaming rings. This dude was not some random street thug. He was literally the CEO of violence. He marched straight into Arthur's glass office with 2 massive bodyguards. From her little desk, Penelope watched the whole dramatic scene through the blinds. Arthur turned pure white. That expensive silk tie suddenly looked like a rope around his neck. Lorenzo spoke, his smooth, low voice slicing right through the glass. "We have a discrepancy," he said. Arthur started sweating bullets, totally stammering as he tried to respond. Arthur is practically begging at this point, swearing every cent is accounted for, and the Cayman transfer went through. But Lorenzo just leans over that fancy desk and drops a bomb. $40 million, Arthur. $40 million is gone from the waterfront account, vanished into some Geneva ghost firm that Arthur allegedly authorized. Arthur literally collapses into his chair, full on hyperventilating. He starts throwing his own team under the bus, crying that the floor handles the routing, and it must be some glitch or cyber attack. Seriously, guys. Life lesson: a weak leader will always blame their team when the heat is on. Lorenzo is not having it. He casually pulls a suppressed pistol from his jacket, sets it on the desk, and says he does not believe in glitches. Lorenzo gives Arthur exactly 24 hours to find the cash, or he starts taking his payment in flesh, pure Mafia movie stuff right there. As Lorenzo turns to leave, his cold eyes scan the open floor. Everyone else is frozen, staring at their screens, absolutely terrified. But not our girl Penelope. She is just standing by the printer with some balance sheets. When the most dangerous man in Chicago locks eyes with her, she does not panic. Instead, she lets out this tiny sigh and literally rolls her eyes at him. It was a micro expression, but for a guy who's Gen Bear for a living, was a flashing neon sign. Lorenzo actually stops in his tracks. He tilts his head, studying this frumpy girl in a beige cardigan who just looks like total prey. She might have looked like weak prey, but her eyes were razor sharp and completely unbothered. They told a totally different story. Lorenzo points at leather glove at a finger right at her and demands her name, his voice slicing through the dead silence. Arthur comes rushing out in a panic, trying to run interference. He actually calls her nobody, just some low-level clerk, and orders her back to the archives. To adjust her glasses and clutches purse, playing the victim perfectly. "It is Pena," she whispers, acting super meek. But Lorenzo is hooked. He steps right into her space, ace towering over her to max out the intimidation. "Did you roll your eyes at me, Penelope?" he asks. The tension in that room was completely off the charts. Penelope shrinks back, shaking perfectly, right on cue. She stammers out this excuse about having an astigmatism and twitchy eyes. Lorenzo just stares at her for this incredibly suffocating moment. He knows she is totally lying. Her performance was absolute Oscar-worthy, right down to the rambling lip, but he already saw that raw genius hiding in her eyes. He leans in super close, dropping his voice so nobody else can hear. 24 hours, Penelope, he whispers. He suggests someone finds the cash, or he starts digging through her archives. As he walks out, the office absolutely loses its mind. Arthur is screaming at everyone to tear the servers apart. Meanwhile, Penelope just casually strolls to her desk and boots up her laptop. Here is the massive plot twist, guys. She did not need 24 hours to find the cash. She already knew where that $40 million was, and she had known for 3 weeks. Why? Because she was the mastermind who actually stole it. Talk about an absolute boss move. Later that night, the rain is just pouring down as Penelope leaves work at 7 p.m. She has this beaten-up yellow umbrella and walks like she carries the weight of the entire world on her slumped shoulders. She takes a dark alley shortcut to the train, splattering through the puddles. Suddenly, a blinding headlight pins her against the brick wall. A black SUV blocks her way, and huge guys step out from behind her. She is totally boxed in. They thought they caught a mouse, but they were so wrong. The back door of that SUV swings open, and Lorenzo steps right out into the rain. He is holding this black umbrella, with the city lights bouncing off the wet street and making him look like an absolute movie villain. An astigmatism, he says, super softly, walking right up to her. He tells her he actually asked his doctor, and apparently it does not cause eye-rolling when someone threatens to end your boss. Penelope just stands there frozen, her little yellow umbrella shaking in the wind. She goes right back into character, begging to go home because her cats need feeding. But Lorenzo just gives this dark, absolutely chilling chuckle. Cut the act, Penelope, he tells her. Let this be a life lesson you can only play dumb for so long before real players catch on. Lorenzo lays it all out. He knows Arthur is a total idiot without the spine to steal 40 million, let alone the brain power to hide it. Lorenzo has had tech guys spending 6 hours tracing that Geneva account, and they hit a firewall so crazy it actually fried 2 of their servers. He steps right into her personal space. He knows she was the only person in that entire office who was not sweating bullets. She is the real puppet master, pulling the strings, and he wants his money right now. Then, the greatest shift happens. Penelope takes a slow, deep breath. The shaking completely stops. That slumped, defeated posture vanishes. She straightens her spine, and suddenly this frumpy clerk is commanding the entire alley. The real Penelope has finally entered the game, and it is glorious. All that fake meekness just evaporates from her eyes, replaced by a cold, calculating brilliance that actually makes a Mafia boss pause. Your texte complete amateurs, Penelope says. And boom boom. The nervous stutter is completely gone. Her voice is smooth, super confident, and dripping with absolute condescension. She tells him they triggered a honeypot trap she set up a month ago. By morning, that firewall is going to dump 3 TB to his servers, tying his crime family to the assassination of a high-profile senator. Lorenzo panics and instinctively reaches for his weapon as his bodyguards step up. I would not do that, Penelope warns him, completely chill, not even bothering to look at the armed goons. Pure, unbothered, absolute boss energy. She drops the absolute hammer on him. If her heart rate drops to 0, or if she does not punch a biometric code into her server by midnight, a dead man switch flips. Every single ledger, bribe, offshore account, and the exact GPS coordinates of his illegal armories get blasted to the FBI, the DEI, the DEA, and the front page of the news. Lorenzo is just standing there, genuine shock hitting his chest. He is used to fighting hardened killers, not a girl in a wet beige cardigan holding a digital sniper rifle to his entire life. He hisses that she is bluffing. Am I? She asks, casually reaching into her tote bag. Here is your final life lesson for today. The most dangerous person in the room is never the loudest one. Stick around, guys, because this showdown is just getting started. You guys won't believe the absolute audacity of this overrezoning scene. Stick with me here. The Mafia enforcers have their guns raised, but Don Lorenzo just holds up a hand. Stop. Penelope, this supposedly harmless IT girl, flashes a waterproof tablet. Lorenzo's secret Swiss bank account, $0. Nada. She looks the underworld boss dead in the eye and drops a nuke. She didn't steal his 40 million bucks. His underboss, Ricardo, the guy he completely trusted, has been skimming cargo for 2 years. Ricardo wired the cash to Geneva for a hostile takeover, planning to assassinate Lorenzo at tomorrow's charity guy. As a life lesson, Ray took a bullet. It was completely unthinkable to Lorenzo. Ricardo was his right-hand man, his top enforcer, but the 0 on that screen did not lie. Lorenzo gets real quiet, dangerously quiet, and demands to know where the money is right now. Penelope just shrugs it off like she is discussing the weather. She caught the shady routing requests 3 weeks ago. When Ricardo tried to wire the 40 million, she snatched it mid-air and bounced it through a decentralized blockchain tumbler. Now, all that Mafia cash is locked in a hyper-encrypted digital vault, and she is the only human alive with the keys. Ricardo, that clown, thinks the bank just delayed the transfer. He has no clue she hijacked his entire war chest. Lorenzo glares at her, asking why she didn't just take the bag of cash and run. Penelope lets out this incredibly tired, bitter laugh. Run where exactly? She drops some brutal honesty. She is a 26-year-old girl with zero combat survival skills. If she ran, Ricardo or Lorenzo would just hunt her down and end her, but then she looks up, but locking eyes with the Mafia boss, and her vibe completely shifts. Running is boring, she tells him. She prefers absolute control. Right now, she holds his 40 million, the ironclad proof of Ricardo's betrayal, and the digital keys to the Don's entire criminal empire. In other words, she absolutely owns him. The only sound left is the heavy rain smashing against the pavement. Lorenzo realizes this girl is a total monster hiding in a cozy wool cardigan. He orders her into his car. Real power never has to shout to prove it exists. Lorenzo actually lets out a massive bark of laughter. He tells her to get in the damn car before he forgets how insanely valuable she is. They are heading to a secure location right now because they have a mob war to plan. Cut to the safe house, which is this brutal concrete fort hidden way out in the deep woods of the North Shore. Inside, it is all bulletproof glass, cold steel, and extreme paranoia. Lorenzo's top 5 enforcers are there, including his second in command, Dominic. They are standing around a massive granite kitchen island, yelling their lungs out, completely losing their minds over the situation. And right there on a bar stool, completely unfazed by these hardened killers, sits Penelope. She is just chilling right in the eye of the hurricane. Let's take a closer look at this dynamic because it is wild. She has ditched the wet cardigan for a black long-sleeved shirt. Typing like an absolute madwoman on 2 laptops she forced the boss to provide. The Mafia goons are ignoring her, treating her like a captive civilian. Dominic slams his heavy fist on the granite, screaming that Ricardo would never turn on them. He is convinced this buzz is lying to save her skin, calling her a glorified calculator. He literally suggests putting a bullet in her and beating the passwords out of her gear. But Don Lorenzo just stands there, silently sipping his scotch. He is not even looking at his screaming enforcer. His eyes are totally glued to Penelope, mesmerized by her absolute lack of fear. Penelope does not even bother looking up from her glowing screens. She just casually mentions that if Dominic shoots her, the decryption keys will permanently scramble. Lorenzo loses his 40 million, and the feds get the blueprints to his entire heroin distribution network by breakfast. Talk about a massive flex. She highly suggests he reconsider his violent problem-solving methods. Dominic loses it, drawing his heavy weapon and charging right at her. But Lorenzo's voice cuts through the room, not yelling, but demanding to make absolute obedience. He orders Dominic to stop immediately. Dominic freezes in disbelief, screaming that she is playing the boss, that she is weak and nothing. Penelope finally stops typing. She hits the enter key with a loud smack. "Check your phone, Dominic." Dominic looks super confused and pulls out his highly encrypted smartphone. You can literally see his eyes widen in pure panic as he reads the message. It is a completely unredacted transcript of a burner phone conversation he had 3 days ago with his mistress. complete with GPS locations and audio files. Penelope takes a chill sip of her sparkling water and drops the hammer. She has root access to every single device in that room. She calmly explains she can drain his bank accounts, erase his identity, or send his darkest secrets to his wife before he can even click the safety off his gun. She looks at this giant mafia muscle and says she doesn't need physical strength to absolutely destroy him. Life lesson, folks. Brains and leverage will beat raw muscle every single time. A heavy, suffocating silence drops over the entire room. These hardened killers are staring at this girl with pure, newfound horror. They finally realize she is not their hostage. She is the warden, and they are locked inside her digital prison. Lorenzo's lips curl up into this slow, incredibly dangerous smile. He loves it. He addresses his men, confirming Ricardo's betrayal. But before he can even finish his sentence, the massive steel front door explodes inward. Boom! The blast shatters the bulletproof glass, sending lethal shards spraying everywhere. A wave of heavily armed mercenaries in full tactical gear swarms into the room, assault rifles blazing. Ricardo did not wait for the gala. He tracked them down. Lorenzo instantly draws his weapon, diving for cover and returning lethal fire. You and I are going to unpack this next sequence together because it is brilliant. Absolute chaos breaks loose. The enforcers scramble for the cover as bullets rip through the walls. The air instantly fills with the sharp smell of explosives and the screams of the wounded. Lorenzo roars over the deafening gunfire, telling Penelope to get down. He fully expects to find her crying in a ball of panic. Instead, he finds her sitting perfectly through a refrigerator behind a massive steel refrigerator, dragging a laptop down with her. Bullets are literally bouncing off the kitchen cabinets above her, but her face is a mask of pure, unyielding focus. She yells back that she needs exactly 3 minutes. Lorenzo screams that they are pinned down by heavy fire and do not have 3 minutes. Lorenzo fires twice, dropping a mercenary trying to flank their position, and yells that Dominic just took a hit. Penelope snaps back, telling him to give her just 2 minutes. Lorenzo aggressively reloads his weapon, shifting his body closer to physically shield her from the flying lead. He can smell her vanilla shampoo, totally mixed with the harsh scent of gunpowder. He demands to know what she is doing while firing blind over the counter. She talks incredibly fast, explaining that the safe house runs on a centralized smart grid. Ricardo's hit squad hacked the system to disable the security before breaching, and she is taking it back. Suddenly, a huge mercenary vaults over the kitchen island, aiming a shotgun right at the Don's head. Just then, the entire house goes pitch black. That sudden blackout completely blinds the hit squad. They were totally relying on the bright interior lights to acquire their targets. Penelope screams out the signal right now. Instantly, an ear-shattering 120 decibel high frequency alarm blasts through the house's internal sound system. We are talking pain-inducing noise that makes the mercenaries drop their guns and clutch their ears in agony. While they are blinded and deafened, the automated fire suppression system kicks in. But it does not spray water, it's pumped thick, suffocating halon gas into the living room, choking all the oxygen from the air. Because Penelope and Lorenzo are tucked away in the kitchen on a different ventilation zone, they are spared. Lorenzo flips down his tactical night vision goggles. With absolute cold-blooded efficiency, Don Lorenzo moves through the pitch-black room like a phantom, taking out the incapacitated mercenaries one by one. It is a total wipeout. When the shooting finally stops, he overrides the manual controls and kills that deafening alarm. He flips on the red emergency backup lights, revealing the living room has become an absolute graveyard for Ricardicide squads. Lorenzo slowly walks back into the kitchen. He has a nasty cut bleeding down his forehead, but he completely ignores it. He looks down at Penelope. She is still parked on the floor, the pale blue glow of her screen lighting up her face. She slams the laptop shut and looks up at him. She is breathing super hard, her hands finally shaking from the adrenaline rush, but her eyes are fierce. We are at the fine flow shell stretch here, guys, and the dynamic completely shifts. He reaches down and offers his hand. Penelope hesitates for a fraction of a second before grabbing it. He pulls her up effortlessly, but deliberately does not let go. His voice is deep, completely devoid of his usual arrogant mafia boss attitude. He looks right at her and says she saved his life. Penelope immediately corrects him, her voice trembling just a tiny bit. She tells him she simply saved her leverage, because if he dies, she loses her protection. Strictly a logical decision, right? But Lorenzo steps far closer, making her tilt her head back to meet his gaze. He gently brushes some debris out of her hair. It is an incredibly intimate gesture in a room that is literally overflowing with pure chaos.
Let me set the stage, guys. Everyone else looked at Penelope and just saw a quiet, chubby girl fading into the background. But not Lorenzo. He leaned in, his thumb tracing her jawline,
and told her straight up that he saw the absolute monster hiding inside her. And honestly, he thought it was the most beautiful thing ever. Penelope froze. For the first time, she was truly seen. Not the body she tried to hide, but her brilliant, ruthless mind. The lesson here: the right person won't want to fix you. Look at this, guys. The North Shore safe house is an absolute wreck. Morning light is just hitting the concrete, and there is glass and physical damage everywhere after last night's insane shootout. The cleanup crew is already out here, working like ghosts, trying to sweep up the mess, but the vibe is incredibly tense. You can literally smell the betrayal in the air. Lorenzo is standing there, bleeding from the head, with a fresh bandage, screaming orders in Italian on a burner phone. But right across from him, Penelope. She is chilling in this massive leather chair, running on zero sleep. Life lesson number 1 for Petite: loyalty is cheap, but a good night of sleep is priceless. You and I both know she's brewing something crazy in that head of hers. For the last 7 hours, as she was moving massive digital vaults across the dark webs just so Ricardo, the ultimate snake of an underboss, cannot trace a single byte of data. Lorenzo hangs up and tells her his are locking down the ports, but he is stressing because Ricardo bought the police commissioner and is raiding their supply lines. Penelope does not even flinch. Bro. She just takes a sip of black coffee and drops the coldest reality check. She tells him physical supply lines are basically ancient history. Lorenzo is playing gang wars while Ricardo is playing Monopoly. The life lesson here is simple. Work smarter, not harder. Ricardo is using Lorenzo's own clean cash against him. So what is her master plan? Just cut off the money entirely. Penelope just looks at him and says she already did it. Absolute boss move. At 4 in the morning, she froze all of Ricardo's offshore shell accounts, but she knows that is just a temporary fix. To absolutely destroy this guy, before the big charity gala tonight, they do not need to take out his street muscle. They need to bankrupt the people backing him up. Lorenzo leans right over her chair, trying to be all intimidating, and demands to know who the backer is. Penelope practically laughs and names State Senator Harrison Caldwell. This corrupt politician has been illegally moving state pension funds into Ricardo's pockets for waterfront kickbacks. Quick life lesson, guys. Greed always leaves a paper trail. If this drops, the senator goes to federal prison. If the senator goes down, Ricardo completely loses his armor. Now, Lorenzo points out that Caldwell is insanely paranoid and keeps his digital tracks totally clean using an offline server at his massive estate. But Penelope just scoffs. Stick with me.
It's because this is where she goes full mastermind. She tells him nobody is
Ever totally spotless.
The senator has this weird obsession with expensive antique art.
A couple of weeks ago, he bought a 17th century vase from London using a hidden trust. Here is a life lesson to Rakem. Your expensive hobbies will always be your downfall. Penelope just smiles this absolutely wicked smile and reveals she planted a virus in that auction house a whole year ago. Talk about a long game. She was ready. The trap was flawless. The moment the senator's secretary opened the digital receipt, Penelope's malware completely shattered their security. She casually drops the bomb that she has been inside his private offline server for 14 solid days. Lorenzo is just staring at her, looking completely terrified but also totally amazed. He thought he hired a basic accountant, but he actually brought in a digital weapon of mass destruction. She did this before anyone even knew Ricardo was planning to betray the family. Penelope just shrugs and says she likes to balance her ledgers and gather dirt on everyone. Take notes on this life lesson, people. Always have a backup plan and keep receipts on your enemies. Lorenzo just throws his head back and laughs out loud. Lorenzo is absolutely losing his mind over how lethal she is. He tells her to pull the trigger, drain the senator dry, and let Ricardo feel the panic setting in. But guess what? Penelope is already 2 steps ahead. She just smiles and says she already forwarded the stolen pension files to the news desk through a bunch of hidden international servers. The scandal is going public in exactly 10 minutes. The ultimate life lesson here: do not just talk about ruining your enemies. Take the shot before they even blink. Lorenzo realizes the charity gala tonight is going to be an absolute war zone. Ricard still thinks he is dead, but Penelope laptop and tells him it will not be a bloodbath. It will be a clichectomate. She needs a wardrobe upgrade first. She tells Lorenzo that if she is stepping into the spotlight to tear this empire down, she needs real armor, not her usual baggy clothes that she used to hide in the background. Lorenzo looks at her and finally sees the true queen on his chessboard. He yells for his second-in-command, limps in totally terrified of Penelope now, and orders him to bring a massive private clothing collection to the penthouse. They are going to dress for absolute destruction. So, the scene shifts to the grand ballroom at the Hilton. It is a stunning sea of chandeliers and fake smiles for the biggest charity event of the year. The biggest life lesson to close this out: the most dangerous monsters in the city are always the ones wearing the nicest suits, drinking champagne in plain sight. Picture Ricardo Costa standing by a champagne fountain, acting like he's just bought the city. He has that predatory look, wearing a tuxedo that hides the fact he is an absolute snake. Next to him is Arthur, Penelope's terrified former boss, dripping sweat all over his collars. And Ricardo handsplains the panicking accountant a glass of bubbly and tells him to chill. He brags that Lorenzo is gone for good because his men burned the boss's safe house to ashes last night. Ricardo promises that by tomorrow, the hostile takeover is done, and Arthur will handle all the accounts. Arthur is shaking, whining about how he hates loose ends. The life lesson here, guys: arrogance is a massive blinder. Bragging about a Mafia takeover before you actually confirm the boss is gone is the ultimate rookie mistake. Arthur is stammering, pointing out that Penelope did not show up for work and knows way too much. Ricardo waves it off with absolute disrespect. He calls her a nobody, joking she's probably crying at home and plans to get rid of her next week. But right then, a massive plot twist hits. The entire ballroom goes dead silent. The string quartet abruptly stops playing. Musicians frozen. Every single person shuts up as the heavy doors at the top of the stairs swing wide open. Lorenzo Bianchi is standing right there, rocking a midnight blue tuxedo, radiating pure, murderous mafia boss energy. Lesson of the day: never underestimate the quiet people in the background. Karma always makes a grand entrance when you least expect it, and Lorenzo is definitely not a ghost. He is ready for war. He looks exactly like a king coming back to take his throne, but get this. It is not Lorenzo making the crowd gasp out loud. It is the woman holding his arm. Penelope totally ditched her invisible girl era. She is wearing a custom emerald green velvet gown that hugs her curves like crazy. It is not hiding anything. It is an absolute flex of power with a deep cut and a massive thigh-high slit that screams boss energy. Her hair, which she used to keep in a stressed-out bun, is falling in dark, glossy waves. The nerdy glasses are gone, replaced by a killer smoky eye that shows off how razor-sharp and smart she really is. The life lesson here is simple. Real glow-ups happen when you finally stop hiding your true self of Quasimodo to make other people comfortable. She looks breathtaking. She looks straight up dangerous. Arthur drops his expensive champagne flute and it shatters on the marble floor with a crack that echoes everywhere. He chokes out her name, his face turning pale white like he just saw a ghost. Ricardo's cocky smirk is wiped out, replaced by pure, unfiltered panic. He is already checking the exits, trying to figure out how to run. Lorenzo and Penelope walk down those stairs so slowly, flexing their dominance with every single step while the crowd parts for them like the Red Sea. Lorenzo leans in and whispers to her, calling her his queen, asking for her first move. Penelope hits him with a cold, terrifying smile and says they need to isolate the king. Life lesson right here. When you stay calm and plan your moves in silence, your success makes all the noise for you. Stick with me here, because this is where it gets crazy. The power couple glides right up Ricardo, but two of his armed goons try to block them, but Lorenzo literally just flicks his wrist. Out of nowhere, Dominic and three heavy hitters step out from the shadows, hands ready on their weapons. Crystal, make a move, and you're getting dropped right in front of the mayor. Ricardo gulps, sweating buckets, trying to act tough as Lorenzo and Penelope stop inches from his face. Ricardo tries to play it cool, saying he heard Lorenzo had a fatal accident at the lake house. Lorenzo just stares him down and softly says reports of his death were completely exaggerated. The lesson: a real boss does not need to yell to be heard. True authority is quiet, steady, and always backed up by solid preparation. Lorenzo ignores Arthur, who is shaking like a leaf. Penelope stares straight into the soul of her awful former boss. She coldly tells him she is not coming in on Monday and calls it her formal resignation. What an absolute mic drop. Arthur freaks out, hissing that she does not belong there. Penelope just smoothly clapped back that she belongs exactly where she chooses to be. You and I are going to love this next part. She turns to Ricardo, dropping the nuke that his main financial backer got busted by the FBI 30 minutes ago. Ricardo tries to play dumb, but Penelope smiles like a total predator. Life lesson for everyone watching: never let anyone dictate your worth. You set your own boundaries and you claim your own space in this world. Penelope completely reads him for filth. She breaks down his operation, explaining that without his backers' funds, he cannot pay his mafia muscle. Without that muscle, he loses control of the ports, And without the $40 million he tried to steal, he is absolutely broke. Ricardo finally drops the fake nice guy act. He gets up in her face, aggressively spitting that she was the one who blocked his transfer. He threatens to burn the hotel down, bragging about 50 men outside. Penelope is ice cold. She calmly tells him he does not have 50 loyal men, pulling her smartphone out of her designer clutch. She hits him with the reality check that he only has 50 mercenaries who expect a massive payout at exactly 9 p.m. The ultimate life lesson? Loyalty bought with money disappears the very second those checks bounce. She checks her diamond watch and casually announces it is exactly 8 p.m. The tension in that massive ballroom is insane, like a bomb about to go off. All the elites back way up, leaving a huge empty circle around the main characters. Ricardo is sweating bullets, hissing that she is bluffing because his offshore bank accounts are locked down tight by the best encryption. Penelope just gently corrects him. They were secure until she personally hacked the system, routing a server attack, completely frying their security protocols. She pauses, looking down at her phone screen as the timer ticks down. Take notes, because the life lesson here is crucial. Never underestimate the power of pure intelligence. A smart mind can tear down an entire empire without throwing a single punch. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ricardo's phone starts going crazy in his pocket, buzzing over and over again. His hands are literally shaking as he pulls it out. His screen is blowing up with panicked messages from his crew. Every single payment bounced. All the accounts are frozen solid. The hired muscles figures out they are not getting paid to fight the top Mafia boss, so they've abandoned their posts instantly. Ricardo's looks up, his eyes wild and desperate. 2 whole years of plotting an empire, completely destroyed in 60 seconds by a brilliant accountant in a velvet dress. He cries that she ruined him. Lorenzo steps up, shielding her, and says Ricardo ruined himself. The lesson is obvious, folks. Greed builds a fragile house of cards, and truth is always the wind that knocks it down. Lorenzo lays down the absolute law. He tells Ricardo that breaking the Mafia oath makes him a dead man walking. In a move of suicidal desperation, Ricardo snaps. He does not attack Lorenzo. The knowing would get dropped instantly. Instead, he steals a combat knife and straight for Penelope, trying to tout the mastermind. This is where you and I get to see Penelope shine. She does not scream. She does not freeze like she used to. She smoothly steps back, pivoting on her high heels like an absolute pro. Then Lorenzo moves in with ungodly speed. He grabs Ricardo's wrist mid-strike and twists it violently. A loud, sickening snap echoes through the silent room. Life lesson? When you try to drag others down with your sinking ship, you only guarantee your own brutal downfall. Ricardo screams in agony, dropping the knife. Before he even hits the floor, Lorenzo grabs his throat and literally lifts him into the air. Lorenzo looks like a demon, his eyes dark pools of pure murder. He snarls at Ricardo, telling him he does not ever get to touch her, or even breathe the same air. It is such a massive protective moment. Lorenzo throws Ricardo down like actual trash. Dominic and the enforcers immediately drag the sobbing traitor away to the basement, far out of sight from the fancy cameras to handle Mafia business. Seeing all this sape, Arthur drops to his knees, bawling his eyes out and begging Lorenzo for mercy, swearing he had no idea. The life lesson here is deep, guys. Your actions have severe consequences, and apologizing only after you get caught will never save you. Arthur is crying, swearing he only did the paperwork, trying to throw Penelope under the bus. Penelope just stares down at the loser boss who verbally abused her and treated her like garbage for 3 years. She does not feel an ounce of pity, just cold detachment. She calls Mao in front of everyone, branding him an accessory to major fraud and treason against the Mafia family. But then she drops the funniest insult, calling him entirely incompetent. She tells him Lorenzo will not kill him. Arthur gets this tiny spark of hope in his teary eyes. Penelope softly shuts that down. She reveals she just sent a massive file of his personal embezzlement directly to the IRS. A beautiful life lesson, folks. Treating people badly always comes back to haunt you when those exact people hold the keys to your secrets. Penelope tells Arthur he is not going to die. He is just going to rot in a federal prison making license plates. Arthur completely collapses on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. The hotel security finally decides to run over, completely lost about the crazy Mafia takeover that just went down. With this final moment, because it is cinematic, Lorenzo turns to face Penelope. His chest is heaving under his suit, the wild adrenaline still pumping through him. He stares at this incredibly calm, collected, and extremely dangerous woman next to him. She literally destroyed an entire criminal syndicate without firing a single weapon. Lorenzo steps super close to her, ignoring the massive crowd watching them, and just breathes out in pure awe. The final life lesson? The absolute sharpest weapon you can ever wield in this world is a brilliant, focused mind. Guys, picture this absolute masterpiece of a moment. Lorenzo stares deep into Penelope's eyes, telling her she is magnificent. Her Ice Queen act melts for a split second, showing the excitement under that fancy emerald velvet dress. She tells him straight up that she prefers to be the one in control. And what does the most dangerous mob boss in Chicago do? He grabs her face, ignoring the cameras and the snobby rich folks whispering around them. He literally dares her to control him, admitting he is totally at her mercy. Let this be a lesson to you. Sometimes the ultimate flex of true power is knowing exactly when to surrender it to the right person. When they finally kiss, it is not some sweet fairy tale garbage. It is an absolute explosion of pure dominance. This kiss is raw, fueled by pure adrenaline. Penelope kisses him back like a savage. The quiet little wallflower is dead and gone. In her place is the absolute queen of the Chicago underworld. The king is eating out of her hand. Look at this, guys. The entire city wakes up the next day to a terrifying new reality. Ricardo Costa is literally deleted from existence, buried under a waterfront project before breakfast. Meanwhile, Arthur Pendleton is crying in a county jail cell. He is completely broke and looking at 50 years for racketeering, and the trail entirely avoids the Bianca family. It just goes to show you that the loudest guy in the room is usually the easiest target, while the quiet ones are out here flawlessly rewriting the rules. Penelope never goes back to that little desk in the basement archives. Heck no, she moves in straight into a massive glass penthouse at the very top of the newly bought Bianca Tower. We are talking a high-tech fortress filled with heavy steel and glowing server racks. Lorenzo is just standing in the doorway, sipping some top-tier bourbon, completely mesmerized. It has been 3 weeks since the crazy gala showdown. The bruises are gone, but the power dynamic in his life is changed forever. She is standing barefoot on an expensive rug, wearing his oversized shirt, staring down a massive digital map of the entire Midwest. Oh, honestly, if there is one thing to learn here, it is that upgrading your mindset will always eventually upgrade your environment. She finally claimed her true worth. She has her hair thrown up in a messy bun, with a pencil behind her ear To a normal person, she just looks like someone working from home. But to Lorenzo, he's looking at a literal 4-star general plotting take the continent. She totally calls him out for staring without taking her eyes off the screens. Lorenzo smooths it over and saying he is just admiring her. He slowly walks up and drops his drink on a fancy desk and wraps his arms right around her waist. He pulls her close and kisses her neck, smelling vanilla and way too much expensive coffee. He literally has to remind her she has been grinding for 12 straight hours. Listen, ambition is incredible, but remember that bread can and appreciate the people in your corner. Even Mafia queens need a coffee break. Lorenzo tries to tell her the rival Irish mob can wait until tomorrow. Penelope just leans back into his chest with a heavy sigh. Get this, their whole romantic dynamic is a massive secret locked inside this bulletproof penthouse. To the streets, she is his absolutely terrifying business partner. But in private, she is the one and only weakness this mob boss has ever allowed himself to have. Penelope taps a button and zooms her map right into the south side. She tells him Declan Fitzpatrick is not going to wait. This Irish boss thinks there is a weak spot on the docks now that Ricardo is dead, and he is trying to smuggle through the turf without paying the tax.
Oh, real talk though, never mistake someone's silence for weakness. They're always watching you single.
Declan seriously thinks they went soft because Pilar used to be an accountant. Big mistake. Lorenzo gets instantly furious. His protective mob boss energy is going crazy right now. Declan is your classic old school brute who uses baseball bats and car bombs. Lorenzo is ready to send his top hitmen down to the docks to literally burn everything to the ground and remind them who runs Chicago. But Penelope shuts that down instantly. She turns around, touches his face, and tells him flat out that the old Lorenzo is dead. Going in guns blazing is just messy, loud, and way too expensive. This be your idea reminder that sometimes brute force is the absolute worst option. Working smarter always beats swinging wild and drawing unwanted attention from the authorities. We don't use bullets anymore. We use our advantage. Bro, what a completely savage line. Lorenzo is getting chills looking at his absolute genius of a girlfriend. He asks her what the master plan is. She walks over to her desk and pulls up this insane web of secret financial data. She breaks it down perfectly. Declan hates modern banking and digital cash. He launders all his dirty money through fancy hotels in Dublin and some shady offshore hedge. Lorenzo points out that the feds cannot even touch that setup. Penelope drops the coldest smile ever, glowing in the light of her monitors. But they aren't untouchable by me. The biggest takeaway here, guys, knowledge is the ultimate weapon. If you know how the system works, you hold all the real power. Stick with me, guys, because you and I are about to unpack some massive mob drama together. Picture this. Penelope spent the last 3 days tracking the secret routing numbers Declan uses to bribe local Irish judges. Now, this brute, Declan, wants a sit-down at the Drake Hotel to demand more waterfront territory, threatening an all-out street war. Penelope actually wants to go, which makes Lorenzo completely freeze up. He tells her no way, calling Declan a rabid dog who will try to bully her, but Penelope totally shuts him down. She tells Lorenzo he is just going to stand there and let her do the talking. Here is a simple life lesson for you. Real power does not need to bark to be respected. The Rishinshi coldly say, it is finally time the rest of the city knows exactly who holds the leash. Next day, the tension inside the private dining room at the Drake Hotel is absolutely suffocating. You have Declan Fitzpatrick, this massive red-faced guy in a custom tweed suit, sitting there with 4 of his deadliest muscle guys behind him. Across from him sits Penelope, looking flawless in a sharp blood-red blazer, with Lorenzo looming behind her like a shadow of pure violence. Declan lights up a thick Cuban cigar, blows smoke right across the table, and starts mocking them. He sneers at Lorenzo, laughing that handing the mob kingdom to a bean counter is a total joke. He calls Penelope sweetheart and says the docs are not a spreadsheet. Seriously, here is a life lesson. Never underestimate someone just because they look neat and polite. That is usually a fatal mistake. Declan keeps bragging that you cannot just crunch numbers when his boys are out environment breaking kneecaps. But Penelope does not even blink, bro. She calmly opens a sleek black leather folder. Her voice drops the room temperature by 10 degrees as she tells Mr. Fitzpatrick that he owes this Biancaker Civid Syndic for $4.2 million in unpaid tariffs for March and April. Declan laughs right in her face, asking if she is going to audit him. He threatens bragging about his 300 armed men and saying he will turn the city into a war zone. But Penelope stays totally chill. Here is a great life lesson. The person who loses their temper always loses the war. She quietly reminds him that 300 men require payroll, completely unfazed by his loud, aggressive barking. She looks him dead in the eye and says payroll requires liquidity, which he no longer has. Guys, Declan stops laughing instantly. He asks what on earth she is talking about, and Penelope just slides a single piece of paper across the table. She reveals that at 8 a.m. sharp, an anonymous whistleblower packet landed on the desk of corporate enforcement in Dublin. It had all the unredacted ledgers proving Declan used his fancy hotels to launder the drug money for the cartel. Oh man, the plot twist is real. Declan turns bright purple and lunges forward, but Lorenzo drops his hand right to his gun, freezing Declan in his tracks. Take it as a serious life lesson. Folks, your dirty secrets always leave a paper trail somewhere. Declan glares at her and spits out that it is a complete lie. Declan insists his servers are airtight, but Penelope coldly corrects him. She exposes that he hired cheap security amateurs in London who used basic open source encryption. Bro, she literally hacked their mainframe while waiting for her morning coffee to brew. That is just savage. She tells him Irish authorities are seizing his hotels right now. His hedge fund in the Isle of Man is frozen, and his bank accounts are locked down. Absolute horror takes over Declan's. Penelope shows zero mercy, telling him straight up that he is bankrupt. Here is a highly valuable life lesson. Never cut corners on your foundation, because cheaping out will cost you everything. She reminds him, will not fight free, friend will be look for a nude balls by tomorrow morning. Then she drops the mic, smiling, that the Bianca Syndicate is luckily hiring. Declan looks over at Lorenzo, desperately hoping for some old-school gangster sympathy. But Lorenzo is just standing there with a look of pure, icy satisfaction. Penelope snaps the folder shut and gives Declan exactly 24 hours to get out of Chicago. She warns him that if he stays after noon tomorrow, Lorenzo will not even have to shoot him. She will just leak the GPS coordinates of his wife's private villa in Tuscany to the angry cartel he just failed. Talk about the ultimate vendetta. Remember this life lesson. Guys, when you are completely outmatched, swallow your pride and walk away before you lose what matters most. Declan stands up, shaking with a mix of helpless rage and absolute terror. Declan looks at the woman he thought he could easily shush around, but now he only sees the absolute devil incarnate. He turns and walks out without saying a single word, his muscle guys scrambling behind him, Notice this shift because you and I are watching brains completely outclass brute force. Once the doors shut, Lorenzo leans down, burying his face in Penelope's neck, shaking with dark, euphoric laughter. He whispers for her never negotiate against him, and she smiles, telling Mr. Bianca to always read the fine print. That right there is the ultimate life lesson. Always read the tyrant in business and in life. For the next 6 months, her genius system works perfectly, moving the mob away from a messy street violence and into the clean space of digital monopolies. Mob profits explode by 400%, while the body count straight to zero. The Chicago police are totally confused because crime seems to be vanishing, even though the Bianca family is quietly buying up half the financial district. But listen up, because here is a timeless life lesson. Massive success always puts a giant target on your back, so never get too lazy. The most dangerous predators do not wear ski masks. They wear FBI badges. Special Agent Jonathan Miller has been hunting Lorenzo for 10 whole years. This guy is highly obsessive, literally sacrificing his marriage and sanity to build a massive RICO case against the family. But every single time Miller gets close, the evidence magically vanishes, and key witnesses suddenly forget everything they saw. Hard drives keep wiping themselves clean. Then, on a rainy Tuesday night, Penelope is chilling on the penthouse sofa with her laptop while Lorenzo reads Machiavelli with a glass of wine. Suddenly, Penelope stops typing. She spots a weird code scrolling across her monitor. Here is an important life lesson for you: always pay attention to the smallest warning signs in life before the real storm hits. She softly calls out Lorenzo's name, and the serious tone of her voice makes him snap to attention instantly. His relaxed vibe completely vanishes, shifting straight into the coiled tension of a dangerous predator. He asks what is wrong, and Penelope's fingers start flying around across the keyboard as she drops the bomb, revealing that someone is actively inside their private network. She confirms it is not an outside hack, bro. It's an inside job sending data straight to an FBI server in Quantico. Lorenzo stands up, his face turning furious as he demands to know who is doing it. Penelope parses through thousands of lines of code in seconds, bypasses the proxy, and locks right onto the physical device transmitting the leaks. She freezes when she sees the name, feeling an intense wave of betrayal for Lorenzo. Guys, it is Peter Kensington. Lorenzo goes completely numb. Peter is the mob's top lawyer, working with Lorenzo for 15 years, and even the godfather to his brother's kids. This brings us to a harsh but true lesson. The mostly painful betrayals never come from your enemies. They always come from the exact people you trust the most. Peter was literally family. Lorenzo asks if she is absolutely sure, his voice dropping into a deadly, terrifying calm. Penelope explains that it uses a hidden microtransmitter disguised as a fancy fountain pen. Whenever he visits the penthouse, the pen secretly downloads files and sends them to Miller's team later. Lorenzo walks over to the window, staring out at the rain-slicked it, looking completely shattered. He whispers how he trusted Peter, protected him, and even paid for his daughter's expense college tuition. Let this be a sobering life lesson. Folks, you can pour money and favors into someone, but you can never buy true character or loyalty. Penelope sets the laptop down, walks over, and gently wraps her arms around him to keep him grounded. Penelope tells him that fear makes men do really stupid things. She guesses the FBI probably found some dirty secret on Peter, like tax evasion, and squeezed him until he broke. But Lorenzo just plainly says he is going to kill him tonight at the warehouse. It is not even a threat, It is just a cold fact to him. But Penelope holds him tighter and says no way. Lorenzo spins around, absolutely furious, saying Peter is handing their little lives to the feds and this is not up for debate. Here is an essential life lesson. Guys reacting purely out of anger, dodge draw usually destroys your own position. Penelope stares right back into his furious eyes with equal intensity and entity and tells him firmly that she is not asking him to negotiate. She has a much bigger, far more devious plan in mind. She tells him a bullet is way too merciful for a traitor, plus it leaves a messy body for the FBI. Stick with me, guys, as you and I are about to witness the ultimate vendetta unfold. She says if Agent Miller wants a show, they will give him a massive show by using Peter to completely destroy the FBI task force. Lorenzo's anger instantly turns into dark curiosity. Penelope explains that Miller is desperate for a physical drug bust and burst to justify his budget. Here is the final life lesson. The absolute best revenge is turning your enemy's own trap against them. Peter thinks he is stealing real files, but he is only hacking a fake honeypot server. Penelope smiles, revealing she is going to plant a heavily guarded trap file tomorrow. Knowing Peter will steal it eagerly. Alright guys, let's unpack this masterpiece of a trap. Penelope drops the details on Lorenzo like an absolute boss. She is fabricating a fake file about a $50 million shipment of Kabbalim snow hitting Navy Pier at midnight. She flashes this gorgeous, bone-chilling smile. We are talking fake guard rotations, made-up license plates, and Lorenzo's forged signature. Lorenzo realizes there is zero product actually arriving. Penelope is playing 4D here. She knows Agent Miller will debate hard. He will drag the DEA and the media out there, wasting millions in federal resources to raid absolutely nothing. Life lesson right here. Never trust a too perfect setup, because someone is usually pulling the strings. Penelope just struts right back to her laptop, ready to cause some chaos. So while Miller and his tech geeks are freezing in the rain chasing ghosts, Lorenzo finally catches on. He gets this incredibly wicked smirk, realizing she will have total, unmonitored access to the federal network. But Penelope shuts him down. Access is just the appetizer. When that traitor, Peter, uses his bugged pen to upload the fake intel, it unleashes a sleeper virus straight into the FBI servers. The second they open it at Quantico, it is game over. Penelope is about to nuke every single photo, file, and fingerprint the government has on the entire Bianchi syndicate. By Saturday, Lorenzo's criminal empire will legally cease to exist. Lorenzo is totally speechless, starstruck by her absolute genius. It just goes to show brain power is the ultimate weapon. You do not need a gun when you can erase your enemy's reality. Lorenzo just wore right up to her, gently holding her face like she is the most precious thing in the world. He looks deep into her eyes and asks as if she has any idea how much he worships her. Seriously, the mob boss is totally down bad. Penelope just smirks, leans in for a kiss, and tells him to save the worship for later because they have a federal agency to destroy. Fast forward to Friday night. The freezing winds are howling off Lake Michigan, making Navy Pier look at the total wasteland of rusted cranes and shipping containers. Over in the shadows, Special Agent Miller is sitting in his black SUV, his heart practically beating out of his chest. He really thinks this is crowning achievement. Sometimes we get so blinded by our own ambition that we walk straight into a trap, ignoring the red flags staring us in the face. Miller is entirely convinced that slimy lawyer Peterita just handed him the ultimate victory. The encrypted field, vague details, the is the GAT container, the timing, even the cartel names.
Miller whispers into his radio, telling all teams to hold their positions while he glares at the thermal monitors. He wants to catch the Beyond crew red-handed before moving in. Meanwhile,
back at Lorenzo's incredibly fancy penthouse, Peter is having a full-blown panic attack. Lorenzo called him in for a late-night meeting, and Peter is literally sweating straight through his custom suit. He keeps nervously touching his chest pocket, right where that bugged fountain pen is hiding. This is why you never betray your own team. The paranoia alone will eat you alive before the King's went. You can literally smell his guilt.
Now, let's take a look at this next scene together, because the tension here is just absolutely chef's kiss. Lorenzo is chilling at the head of his massive dining table,
casually cutting into a rare stick like hadn't a care in the world. Penelope is right next to him, scrolling on her tablet and looking beautifully bored. Lorenzo tells Peter he looks sick and offers him a drink, playing the perfect host. Peter stutters, dabbing his sweaty forehead, and tries to blame it on a stomach bug. Then Penelope drops the hammer. Without even looking up, she casually mentions that his dual employment must be super stressful. Boom! The entire room goes dead silent. The blood completely drains from Peter's face. If you are going to play both sides, you better be a genius, because half measures will get you destroyed. The man is frozen in pure terror. Peter tries to play dumb, stammering that he has no clue what she is talking about. But Penelope is not having it. She sets her tablet, folds her hands, and lays out how she has been feeding him dummy files for the feds for 3 solid months. She even compliments his spy pen, mocking him by saying it is a real shame. Agent Miller is about as his pench. Peter turns his mind and bolts for the elevator. But he doesn't even make it 3 steps before Dominic, the snickered top muscle, steps out of the dark with a silenced pistol right at his chest. Lorenzo barks at him to sit down, his voice oozing with raw boss energy. Peter collapses, shaking like a leaf. Let this be a lesson to anyone trying to hustle or hustlers. If you step into the big leagues, make sure you actually know how to play the game. Peter starts crying, begging for his life. He screams that the FBI forced him, that Miller had proof he messed with the jury 5 years ago and was threatening him with federal prison. He swears he only leaked low-level garbage. But Penelope just brutally corrects him, stating he only leaked exactly what she allowed him to leak. She taps a screen, and the giant television in the room powers on, showing a hacked live feed from a news chopper flying over Navy Pier. Peter is trembling, begging to know what is happening. Penelope just smiles that terrifying smile of hers and calls it his grand finale. Right on cue, the TV shows an absolute swarm of FBI tactical trucks invading the pier. Here is a solid truth for you. The people who betray you out of fear will always be the easiest to manipulate. Peter thought he was saving himself. The screen lights up with red and blue sirens in the dark. Heavily armed SWAT teams swarm the exact shipping container Peter promised was packed with product. Penelope plays narrator, calmly explaining that Miller is ripping open the doors, expecting $50 million in snow. Instead, he finds 5,000 crates of premium, cold-pressed olive oil. And get this, it is completely legal, fully taxed, and belongs to a homeless charity. The camera zooms in on Miller, standing in a sea of olive oil, looking like his soul just left his body. Penelope says that is not even the best part, typing away like a hacker goddess. Because Miller diverted his tech power to run the raid, he left the Department of Justice firewall completely undefended. It is wild how tunnel vision can utterly destroy you. Focus too hard on one shiny object and you leave your vault unlocked. Stick with me here, because this is where the massive hot partisans hits 1%, saying a green checkmark pops up, saying the purge is complete. Penelope lets out a deep breath, totally satisfied. In one swift move, the Bianchi Syndicate's entire digital existence is wiped off the face of the earth. Wiretaps, photos, witness statements, completely gone. They are ghosts. Lorenzo looks at her like she is a goddess, just bursting with pride. Then he turns his focus back to the sniveling lawyer. He walks toward Peter, his voice dangerously calm, and drops a heavy dose of reality. He tells Peter that in the old Mafia days, he would have had his enforcer drag him into and down to Uzma basement for a gruesome skin-peeling session. Honestly, adapting to the times is how you survive. Violence makes headlines, but wiping a database makes you untouchable. Lorenzo grins and says his brilliant queen taught him the fine art of corporate punishment. Peter is literally sobbing on his knees now, playing the family card to save his own skin. Penelope struts over, stands right next to her man, and agrees. She tells Peter that his family is exactly why they are not going to put a bullet in his head. Instead, 10 minutes ago, she wired $10 million from a dirty offshore account right into Peter's clean, personal bank account. Peter is looking up at her, completely confused and terrified, asking why. Penelope just hits him with eyes as cold as liquid nitrogen.
She explains she just tipped off the IRS, accusing Peter of embezzling mob money to run an illegal underage gambling ring.
There is a harsh lesson to learn here. True revenge is not about ending someone's life. It is about completely dismantling their reputation. Penelope just mercilessly lays out his future. By Monday, his assets are frozen. He will be disbarred and thrown into a federal cell for tax evasion. And Agent Miller will completely throw him under the bus because Peter just humiliated him on live national television. Peter absolutely crumbles to the floor, a completely destroyed man. He finally realizes what everyone else already knows. The real monster of the Chicago underworld is not the mafia boss with a gun. It is the genius woman armed with a keyboard. Lorenzo waves his hand, telling Dominic to drag out the trash, and makes a sarcastic joke about ensuring Peter takes his little spy pen with him. The muscle drags the crying lawyer into the elevator. When those doors finally shut, the penthouse goes totally silent. But it is not a heavy silence any. More, always remember, the loudest person in the room is rarely the most dangerous one. That quiet room felt totally different now. It was the crisp, immaculate silence of absolute, flawless victory. Lorenzo strolls over to those massive floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the glittering Chicago skyline. All those flashing lights, all those dark alleys, all the money and power, it entirely belongs to them now. Penelope walks up and leans her head softly against his shoulder, resting her hand right over his ears. Is that taste? You feel that, you steadied aroma, victorious rhythm. Lorenzo wraps a protective arm around her waist, pulling her incredibly close. He murmurs that the people in their circle are still whispering about her, especially the snobby wives at the elite country clubs. It just proves that society loves to judge a book by its cover. People will always gossip about what they cannot understand, completely unaware that the person they are mocking is actually the one pulling all their strings. You and I have probably both felt this way before. Lorenzo tells her those elites still think she is just some quiet, plain girl who got insanely lucky. But Penelope just looks up at him, her eyes sparkling with pure, wicked brilliance. She tells him to let them whisper, let them think she is weak, let them completely underestimate her. Lorenzo leans down and gives her a kiss that basically promises a lifetime of absolute power and beautiful destruction. He whispers against her lips that from now on, whenever anyone speaks her name, they will be praying. Her transformation is officially complete. That invisible little wallflower is dead, and a gorgeous, lethal queen has taken her place. Everyone saw a pushover meant for the background, but they were dead wrong. The biggest mistake you can ever make in life is mistaking someone's quiet patience for weakness. They are going to rule everything. Everyone totally underestimated her because society never looks close enough. They completely minced the absolute apex predator hiding behind a shy stutter. But Lorenzo saw the truth. This guy offered her an entire criminal empire, and she claimed it, using nothing but pure brain power. Now they rule Chicago through ironclad control instead of cheap street violence. The era of the bullied girl is officially dead, and the Mafia's new digital queen has taken the throne. And wow, what a wild ride this story has been. People misjudged a quiet accountant, and it cost them everything. She proved that true dominance does not require a loaded weapon. Remember this life lesson: never look down on someone just because they are quiet. They might just end up owning your entire life. Real power comes from absolute genius, holding the ultimate advantage and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Honestly, did her massive glow-up and a little hostile takeover leave you as speechless as I am right now? If you loved watching Hidden Wallflower morph into an untouchable boss and destroy her haters, you need to smash that like button right this second. And got a friend who loves a dark mafia romance where the girl actually runs the entire show? Send this video their way. It is a powerful reminder that patience and strategy will always outlast impulsive anger. Do not forget to subscribe and hit that bell for more crazy revenge stories. Drop a comment with your favorite boss move from Penelope, and I will catch you in the G1. This story carries a powerful educational message about prejudice, hidden intelligence, self-worth, and the danger of underestimating people based on appearance. Penelope Cartwright is introduced as an invisible office worker, overweight, awkward, quiet, and mocked by the people around her. Her co-workers see only her cardigan, her stutter, and her social anxiety. They call her weak because they cannot imagine that power might exist outside beauty, confidence, or physical dominance. But the entire story proves that their judgment is disastrously wrong. The first lesson is that appearance is never a reliable measure of ability. Penelope is dismissed as pudding penny, treated like a low-level clerk, and ignored by men who believe themselves more powerful. Yet she is the smartest person in the room. She understands the financial systems, digital pathways, hidden accounts, and criminal weaknesses better than anyone else. This teaches viewers that the talent aren't hide behind silence. A person who does not fit society's beauty standards may still possess extraordinary intelligence, discipline, and strategic power. Another important lesson is about patience. Penelope does not react emotionally to insults. She observes her. She gathers evidence. She builds leverage quietly. For years, people underestimate her, and instead of wasting energy begging for respect, she prepares. This is an important message. Sometimes the strongest response to humiliation is not anger, but preparation. When the moment comes, Penelope does not need approval because she already has power. The story also shows the difference between violence and intelligence. Lorenzo and the men around him are used to solving problems with guns, intimidation, and physical force. Penelope changes the rules. She defeats enemies through data, financial pressure, digital traps, and psychological control. This does not mean her actions are morally pure, but it does show that the mind can be more powerful than weapons. In a world that worships brute strength, Penelope proves that strategy can dominate violence. Lorenzo Ayre's transformation is also meaningful. At first, he sees Penelope as a possible threat, then as a weapon, and finally as an equal. Unlike others, he learns to see the person beneath the disguise. His respect matters because it is not based on her becoming thin, glamorous, or socially acceptable. He respects her mind, her courage, and her control. That is a valuable about recognition. The right person's sees strength before the world applauds it. However, the story also warns that power can be dangerous when it is driven by revenge. Penelope Ayre's rise is thrilling, but it raises questions about morality. Intelligence should not only be used to destroy others. In real life, the best use of talent, expose corruption, and build a life with dignity.
Viewers, the message is clear. Never let society as shallow define you, or if they mock you. Okay. Stress you. Let your growth become the answer. Penelope's story teaches that troubles when asking others to see it, then start proving it through its action.